Hi children, welcome you all to our today's biology class. Do you remember what we have learned in the last session? Okay, we learned about food preservation, isn't it? Today let us learn about nitrogen fixation. We already learned in the last session among friendly microorganisms, some microorganisms increase the soil fertility by fixing atmospheric nitrogen. There we are calling biological fixers. Okay. The rhizobium bacterium is present in the root nodules of leguminous plants, especially peas and beans. These bacteria or algae fixing the gaseous nitrogen in the atmosphere in the form of compounds of nitrogen and adding into the soil. Thus they increasing the soil fertility. The nitrogen is also fixing by lightning. Here the rhizobium bacteria led a symbiotic relationship with the leguminous plants. You learned in class 7 symbiosis, symbiotic relationship. The mutual dependence between two organisms where they sharing shelter and nutrients. Here these rhizobium bacterium also have a symbiotic relationship with the leguminous plants. Okay. We know that around 78% of nitrogen is present in the atmosphere in the form of gases. From this gaseous nitrogen, some amount is fixed by some bacteria or blue-green algae. How does the percentage of nitrogen balancing in the nature as 78%? To know about that, we have to study the nitrogen cycle. So let us discuss about the nitrogen cycle. In the atmosphere, around 78% of nitrogen is present in the form of gaseous state. And this atmospheric nitrogen is taken by or fixed by either blue-green algae or rhizobium bacterium. They convert these gaseous nitrogen in the form of nitrogenous compounds and adding into the soil. Now the gaseous nitrogen present in the soil in the form of compounds. Also, by the process of lightning, some amount of atmospheric nitrogen fixing in the form of nitrogenous compounds. From the soil, the nitrogenous compounds are taken by plants for their growth and development. We know that nitrogen is an important nutrient for the growth and development in plants. And also nitrogen is an important constituent in the compounds like protein, nucleic acids, chlorophyll and vitamins. For all these compounds are preparing by the addition of nitrogen. When plants are eaten by the animals, these nitrogenous compounds are going into the body of animals and in the body of us when we are taking the plant products as our food. After death and decay of these animals and also through the excretory materials, these nitrogenous compounds again goes back to soil. In the soil, there are varieties of microorganisms. Some of them convert the compounds of nitrogen in the form of free nitrogen and they are converting in the form of gaseous nitrogen. by decomposition of the nitrogenous compounds. They are called as denitrifying bacteria. Here these rhizobium bacteria which are fixing or converting gaseous nitrogen into compounds of nitrogen, we can call them as nitrifying bacteria. Whereas in the opposite side we can see some bacteria are degrading the compounds of nitrogen in the form of free nitrogen. That process we can term as denitrification. Nitrification and denitrification. Opposite actions. Both are done by bacteria, microorganisms. Okay. Here we can see that there is a cyclic transformation of the nitrogen, gaseous nitrogen in the compounds. Then again the compounds of nitrogen going back into the atmosphere in the form of gaseous nitrogen. Here the cyclic method, nitrogen is transferring into various steps. And this is called a nitrogen cycle. And due to this nitrogen cycle, the amount of nitrogen in the atmosphere is maintained as a percentage of 78. Okay, this is a biochemical cycle, that is nitrogen cycle. Like this nitrogen cycle, many other compounds are also, elements are also maintaining their amount, like oxygen, carbon, water, etc. Their quantity is maintained in the atmosphere by this cyclic passage. Okay, this is nitrogen cycle. Children, first atmospheric nitrogen. The atmospheric nitrogen is taken by rhizobium or blue-green algae. They are fixing the gaseous nitrogen in the form of nitrogenous compounds and adding into the soil. From the soil, it is taken by plants. By eating plants, it goes to the body of animals and the body of humans. After death and decay of animals and humans, and also through the excretory materials, again coming back to the soil. From the soil, these compounds of nitrogen are degraded by some bacteria. They are called denitrifying bacteria. They degrade the compounds, complex compounds of nitrogen, and release free nitrogen in the form of nitrogen gas. So this is the way the amount of nitrogen is maintained in the atmosphere as 78%. Okay. In this lesson, we discussed about microorganisms, friendly microbes and harmful microbes, and their various friendly activities and harmful activities. And we discussed about plant diseases, animal diseases and human diseases which are caused by microbes. Various methods of food preservation. At last, we discussed the nitrogen cycle.
Nitrogen cycle. Living organisms require nitrogen for the synthesis of proteins and nucleic acids. Atmosphere contains about 78% of nitrogen, but it cannot be utilized by living organisms unless fixed in the form of ammonia, amino acids or nitrates. The cyclic process by which nitrogen element is circulated continuously through the living and non-living components of the biosphere is called nitrogen cycle in nature. Atmosphere and water bodies contain nitrogen. Plants cannot absorb nitrogen as such, but absorb nitrogen as ammonia and nitrates. Blue-green algae and certain bacteria can fix atmospheric nitrogen into nitrates. There are three ways of nitrogen fixation. They are atmospheric nitrogen fixation, biological nitrogen fixation, industrial nitrogen fixation. Atmospheric nitrogen fixation. During lightning, due to high temperature, The atmospheric nitrogen reacts with oxygen and forms nitrous oxide, nitric oxide, and nitrogen peroxide. These compounds dissolve in rainwater to form dilute nitric acid. When it reaches the Earth's surface, they react with alkalis and form nitrates. Plants easily absorb nitrates. Biological fixation. Certain bacteria and blue-green algae can fix atmospheric nitrogen directly into nitrates. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria are of two types. Free-living, example Azotobacter and Clostridium. Symbiotic, example Rhizobium, present in the root nodules of certain leguminous plants. Anabaena and nostoc, algae. Industrial nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen combines with hydrogen under high pressure and high temperature to yield ammonia, Haber's process, which in turn oxidizes to form nitrates or ammonium salts. Steps involved in the process of nitrogen cycle are: atmospheric nitrogen is fixed and assimilated. Ammonification, nitrification, denitrification. Ammonification, the process of conversion of complex organic compounds into ammonia, is called ammonification. The dead remains of plants and animals and nitrogenous excretions of animals is converted into ammonia, carbon dioxide and water by the action of putrefying bacteria like actinomyces present in the soil and fungi. Nitrification, conversion of ammonia to nitrates and nitrites, is brought about by the nitrifying bacteria. Steps involved are: ammonia is oxidized to nitrites by Nitrosomonas bacteria. Nitrobacter oxidizes nitrites to nitrates. Denitrification. Bacteria Pseudomonas and Bacillus denitrificans convert nitrate to free nitrogen. This process is called denitrification. These bacteria are active only in waterlogged conditions. So, rate of denitrification is less than that of nitrification. Nitrogen enters into the biotic components through plants. Plants absorb nitrates from the soil. Plants synthesize various organic compounds like proteins and amino acids which pass on to consumers via food chain. Dead plants and animals are decomposed and ammonia is released. Ammonia thus formed is converted to nitrates by nitrifying bacteria. Plants absorb a part of it and rest is liberated as free nitrogen by denitrifying bacteria.
So this is the time to wind up today's session. See you again with a new topic. Thank you.